Hi, welcome to another session about TCP Handshake. Let's say when a client is trying to access a website, there is something happening before data sharing, which is three-way handshake. What happens between this client and web server? There is a TCP session formed. So how that is formed? That's what we check here. At the beginning, uh, after DNS, when a client trying to resolve a FQDN, once it has a IP address, it it send a SYN request to web server. That SYN request will have a sequence number, and let's say in our scenario, which is 100. So that sequence number is client sequence number. So once that is received at the server side, uh, it get updated. And what happens? He acknowledge that sequence number by updating the packet size of information or data we can call, which is received from the client. So when he is sending a SYNAC, when server is sending a SYNAC, it will have a server sequence number as well as the acknowledgement for client sequence number. So the client sequence number will be updated with packet length. So uh, in our scenario, like it is acknowledging with 200. Server is sending a SYNAC with the server sequence number of 200 plus updated sequence number is acknowledged. So in that SYNAC, client will understand that okay, the SYN request which is sent is received. I received acknowledgement. So in third step, what happens? The client will acknowledge this SYNAC. So in that communication, what he does, uh, he received two information like server sequence number, which is 200 in our scenario, and he received acknowledgement number for his client sequence number also. So in that communication, he understand okay, all right, all in place. So he's acknowledging the same information, saying I received server sequence number and I'm updating one phantom byte. So it is 201, and he's sharing client sequence number also, which is 101. So while sending all this sequence number, like, or we can say basically from acknowledgement sequence number, both the host, they are agreeing, I'm expecting the next sequence number, which is this, like that. So this is what three-way handshake. So when after this, a TCP session will be formed. And when a client and server is communicating, like let's say client is requesting for some details, is sending get HTTP something. So what happens? He uses the same sequence number which were they stopped. So which is sequence number 101 and 201, which is server sequence number. And he's sending 10 bytes of data. So when server is responding back, he's saying that okay, you have requested for HTTP and I'm sending you HTTP 200, which is okay. And he's sharing the latest sequence number. So what happens in recent communication, the sequence number was server sequence number was 201, and no additional data has sent off. So he is using the same sequence number, but here client sequence number is getting updated. Why? Because the latest client sequence number was 101 and server received 10 bytes of data. So he is updating that and he's acknowledging it. Okay, this is what the latest sequence number which I'm expecting from you for next communication. So along with that, he's sending 20 bytes of data to client. So when client received that information, he's acknowledging back. Okay, I have received your communication or data which you sent. I'm acknowledging it with latest sequence number. So in this scenario, sequence number 111 is client sequence number, but he received 20 bytes of data from server. So what happens? He has to update that. He has to acknowledge that. So he's doing that. He's updating it. Then 221, the latest server sequence number. So this is how they communicate. After that, server web server is sharing the data. So again, they use latest sequence number. So when server is sharing the data, let's say it has 100 bytes. That's it. So uh, the sequence number, server sequence number will be 221 and 111. Client sequence number, he's acknowledging it. So once client has that information, he's acknowledging back. So that acknowledgement will again that sequence number, server sequence number is getting updated again. So it was 221 and now it's 321 and client sequence number will be 111. So let's say all the communications done. So they want to close this session. So what happens? A four-way communication will happen. So in our scenario, server is done with details which he is supposed to share. So what happens? He send a FINAC. So in that also there is a sequence number. They use again the latest sequence number where they ended the communication. Ended as in where they were in the communication. So now they use 321 and acknowledgement will be 111, which was an hour scenario. So and one phantom byte size will be. So client will acknowledge back with the latest sequence number, his sequence client sequence number, and he's acknowledging it with updated server sequence number. So that communication is done. And second stage, along with this FINAC received from server, client has to send a FINAC. So he will send a FINAC with latest sequence number. So in this scenario, it is sequence number 111, which is for client, and he's acknowledging it for 322. And the size of data is 1 phantom byte. So his server has to acknowledge that. So what happens? He received 1 phantom byte. So he update the client sequence number by making it as 112, acknowledging it, and he's sharing his latest sequence number. So this is how a connection closing is happening, which is also called TCP forward termination. So this is what happens when a client server communication happens for. It can be a website or application or any TCP connection or communication we can say. So I hope you have understood the terminologies and the communication. Thank you for watching.